Okay, Chair Waddell, we have a quorum and we are recording, so we can go ahead and get started.
Alrighty, welcome back, everybody. It's been a while, I think. Claire, would you do me a favor and do the roll call?
Certainly. Chair Waddell,
Here.
Vice Chair Jackson,
Here.
Commissioner Carpenter,
Present.
Commissioner Hanovich,
Present.
Commissioner Schaus,
Present.
Commissioner Steiner,
Present.
Commissioner White,
Present.
Councilmember Harris, Economic Vitality Director Heidi Hansen, Airport Director Brian Gall,
Present.
Airport Programs Manager Adam Miali.
Present.
I am present, Claire Harper, Airport Communications Manager, Tim Skinner, our Operations and ARF Manager,
Present.
and then Missy is out of office. And then we do have Elsa, who will be sharing our regional plan with us, update later in the meeting.
We're seeing exactly what you're seeing.
Yes, thanks for having me.
I don't know how to do that.
Okay, do we have any public comment?
It doesn't look like we have anyone from the public on the meeting, and we don't have anyone in person.
Okay, then we'll move on with the announcements. Any reconsiderations, change the agenda?
None at this time.
I don't hear anyone, so I'm asking one of the board members to recommend approval of the last meeting minutes.
This is Commissioner Hanovich. I'll motion to approve the minutes of this meeting.
Do we have a second?
Motion seconded.
And all those in favor, say aye.
I hear. Teams.
Opposed? Okay, I marked the minutes as approved as submitted. And if I am correct, Councilman Harris is not available for the city council update.
That is correct. And Councilmember Harris' term has expired. So in January, we will get a new city council member as our commission liaison.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, on to the staff reports then. Air operations update.
Chair Bill, to give us 1 second, we're working on moving to that slide.
Today, I'm not going.
And if you just click on that screen, you should be able to scroll through with your arrows.
Yeah. On it. Oh, pardon me.
One more. Back.
Nope, that one. Yeah, sorry. Great. So for employments through November, we had in November we had 7,338, which is a substantial increase over 2023's numbers. We had about a 5% increase. Right now, for the year to date, we're sitting a little over 70,000. Last year we had 72,000 total. So just looking at the past few Decembers, we expect to be above our total employments for 2024 compared to 2023 and probably compared to 2022 as well. Actually, maybe correct me on that one. I think we'll probably still end up a little lower than 2022, but should be ahead of 2023 at the end of this year. And just a reminder, an employment is defined as a revenue passenger, so paying passenger boarding and commercial flight. So it counts the departures, not the arrivals. And for total operations, an operation is a takeoff or landing. So each aircraft takeoff or landing is counted as a single operation. In November, we had 3,115 compared to about 2,600 last year. So that was actually a 17% increase over 2023. So pretty sizable jump in operations compared to last year. We've had some favorable flying weather this December. This is the highest operations count we've had since 2021. So pretty good month for us. Kind of keeping an upward trend that we've had for the past few months. That was actually a 17% increase over the previous year. So quite a few aircraft operations ongoing. And for parking revenue, this is a little bit of an outlier for us. So for November, we had $45,846 in parking revenue. That's about $10,000 less than last year, which is especially interesting given that employments were more than this time last year. So I think it's speculation at this point, but I think we're seeing perhaps a change in parking behavior, possibly due to people getting dropped off more at the airport. The lot seems to be functioning well. We seem to have fewer mechanical issues with the lot compared to this time last year. But it just seems like we're seeing fewer parkers or people parking for shorter periods of time.
It does not look like Orville is with us at this time.
Oh, wait.
All right, let's go ahead with the project and grant updates.
Fantastic. Good afternoon, everyone. This is Adam Yali, Airport Programs Manager. I've got a very short one slide today. As a matter of fact, talking about two projects. First one is our Express Visitor Center. Used to be the old cafe space. We had a very productive meeting yesterday with our job order contractor. They're progressing very, very well through their design phase. And what that does is we're making sure all of our measurements for the improvements are correct. And they're also generating some architectural renderings for us. We should be receiving that on the 23rd. Staff will review it and provide some feedback and then get it back to the contractor. And they'll use our comments and the renderings to define their final scope and fee. And we are anticipated to receive that on the 14th of January, as long as everything matches up with us. And then we will go ahead and get the contract to them, get that initiated. And as it stands, we are looking at the end of early to late April is when we are looking to be complete with the construction of that project. You may recall that's where the micro visitor center is going to be located. Any questions on that before I move on to the snow removal equipment building? None? Okay. The snow removal equipment building, we received our guaranteed maximum price from our contractor. We reviewed that information and sent it over to our counterparts over at the FAA. They've reviewed those documents as well, and they have provided us with some comments. And so we did receive the comments from them. And staff is meeting with them next week, I believe on the 19th, to go over their comments as well as our responses to their comments. So hopefully we can get a couple items ironed out and we'll be moving forward. I look forward to next month's meeting so I can bring you a better update as far as the snow removal equipment building. That's all I have today. Go ahead.
Adam, did they have any substantial comments that you were worried about, or was it just dotting I's and crossing T's?
I'm going to say it's a little combination of both. There was a couple on there. I think we just needed to have a better conversation. So that meeting that we're going to have on the 19th, we're also going to have our design partners with us. We just want to make sure that we're interpreting their comments the way that they intended to write them. There's a few of those, but for the most part, a lot of them are innocuous.
And to add a little bit to what Adam was talking about, Chair Waddell, some of the comments, so whenever we do a construction project like this, there's some questions about eligibility of expenses, which portions of the project are eligible for that federal funding. We worked with previous FAA staff that was assigned to this to develop a methodology for what percentage of the building is eligible for that per FAA's published guidance. The current group that's reviewing it had a little bit of a different interpretation of that. So we want to meet with them to kind of reconcile their previous comments with their current comments to make sure we're on the same page for what portions of the building are eligible for that federal funding versus what has to be paid for out of our local match. So those are probably the most substantial ones that we need to kind of resolve some differing comments on.
Do you think we might see any real dirt moving by the summer?
That's our intent.
That's our intent, and that's a good question, because we do have grant funding in place for a portion of the construction. And that's gonna be one of the points of conversation with the FAA is, do we get started with the funding we have, even if it's short of funding the complete building, or do they want us to wait until we have the full pot of money available to get from 0 to 100? So that's one of the topics of conversation about the phasing of the project.
Okay. It'd be nice to see that thing finally get built.
Agreed.
Adam has secured a very nice stockpile of dirt for us just outside the security fence, so it's out there waiting to go as soon as we're ready for it.
All right. Okay, anything else on the airport projects? Okay. Communications and business updates.
All right. So as we shared at our last few meetings, we did apply for the Small Community Air Service Development Grant. We found out the end of October that we were not selected for that grant. The average community contribution for the communities that were selected for that grant, the cash that they were putting forward averaged $526,000. We had $75,000. It's also just one airport per state, and the Safford Airport was selected. And I believe, what did they have? $200,000?
That's what I heard.
They had about $200,000. So seeing that, we know that we need to be able to up our community cash contribution. And that's something that we're going to bring before council as a budget request, and also start working on our relationships, the chamber, see what community businesses are able to or interested in putting a little bit more money forward. So we have a little bit stronger of a case, but we will do a debrief with the FAA and the selection committee and see what we can do to make our application stronger next year. We started our LAX service on October 12th. Brian and I attended a meeting with airlines the end of October. And American shared with us that due to low numbers, they will be discontinuing that weekly service January 4th. They are picking it back up in early May, and we'll continue conversations with them about having more of a frequency. Right now, it is just that weekly frequency, but we may have more success if it's more than once a week. So we'll continue those conversations. And then in broader air service attraction efforts, we have brought on a consultant that will help us facilitate some meetings. So we're looking forward in the new year to hopefully sit down with 3 airlines and continue our conversations about adding more service. I do see a question from Commissioner Jackson.
Sorry, I couldn't find my mic. Thank you, Claire. This is great. I have a question about the American, the LA service, and knowing that we have to, that you're looking for more money from the community. Are they still getting subsidies when they return in May?
They weren't getting subsidized at all. This was all on their own. So they're not taking, we're not doing an air carrier incentive policy, and they're not part of the Small Community Air Service Development Grant. So they're not being subsidized. The service to LA, no American service is being subsidized right now.
So we weren't waiving any landing fees or any fees at the airport?
No.
Okay. I thought that at one of our meetings that we were in hopes that they would make it, that they would continue the service and continue increase the frequency.
So we had presented our air carrier incentive policy that went, we presented it to the commission, and then it went ahead of council. And those new guidelines were just issued in January or February. So we were pretty on top and one of the first airports to put out the new guidelines with that new FAA guidance. Since then, they've revised the guidance a bit. We all attended like an FAA compliance workshop 2 or 3 weeks ago, where they had some new guidance on that. So we're working with our legal team to get that finalized and then put it out there. But most likely, unless it would make more sense for incumbent carrier like American to use that route to, unless it's for a 1-day frequency or a once a week frequency, taking advantage of an air carrier incentive policy wouldn't be the best way for them to utilize it. It would be, there'd be more incentives if they had more frequent service or could commit to something more than 90 days.
Okay, thank you for the clarity, Claire. Appreciate it.
Certainly. Any other questions?
Anything else for Claire?
And then Heidi Gale's question was if the LAX service was being subsidized. Subsidized.
Thank you.
Okay. Alrighty then, if there's nothing else, we can move on to the Flagstaff Regional Plan for 2045.
Hi, everyone. My name is Elsa Erling. I'm the Associate Planner in Comprehensive Planning for the city. And I have some slides today on the regional plan, so I'll just pull them up and put them in. Okay, are you able to see the view with the full slide?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. All right, so the Flagstaff Regional Plan, there is a full draft now, and we've been in a 60-day public review that started in October. Unfortunately, because of the timing of this commission's meetings, I wish I could have come to you sooner, but right now we have 1 week left of the 60-day public review, and we would like to get some comments from this commission if possible. In this presentation, I'm going to talk a little bit about the plan in general and then some parts of the plan that are specific to the airport and the surrounding area. And I hope that will help direct parts where you may be interested in weighing in. Although, of course, if you'd like to tackle the full document, it's 230 pages, but we welcome your comments on it, on any part of it. So to get into a little bit of background about where we are in the process of the regional plan, we are at the star by the review draft box. But the process of creating this plan has been going on for about 2 years already. There's been a lot of community engagement, thinking about the vision for the plan, and then gathering data, and we've done a process called scenario planning or scenario choosing, where the public was weighing in on different growth scenarios. So at this point, we also had an advisory committee that reviewed each chapter of the plan, and I'll talk about them in a bit. And that brought us to the full draft. And after the 60-day public review is done, there'll be more legal review, more revision based on the comments we receive, and eventually this will be in front of council and the County Board of Supervisors as well. So in the approach to updating this plan, this is a plan that gets updated about every 10 years. It began with thinking about what worked and didn't work about the existing plan, which was adopted in 2014. And the team identified some critical success factors for the new plan. I won't read each of these, but some really key ones were that this plan is more concise and that it's implementable. It doesn't have conflicts with the information and goals and policies that's in the plan. Instead, we want to have a prioritized plan and more clarity in some of the ways that it functions, especially with the future growth illustration, which I'll get to in a couple slides as well. So this is a picture of some of the members of the Regional Plan Committee. They were selected by city and county managers, and they were a group that held 15 meetings over about 10 months. They covered a wide range of perspectives. This plan applies not only to the city, but also to the county. So at least the county communities that are close to the city within the Flagstaff Metro Plan area boundary. So that includes Belmont, Fort Valley, Donny Park, and Kachina and Mountain Air. They had meetings that were open to the public. We had some people from the public and from other commissions attend. The meetings were recorded and they're posted online. So if you're interested in any of the discussion from this committee, you can go back and watch those meetings if you'd like. They reviewed each chapter and then they endorsed the plan as a whole on Monday, September 30th, which kicked off the 60-day public review. This is an outline of the 60-day public review. As I mentioned, right now we're towards the end. We have a week left. It closes December 19th at 5 p.m. We had some workshops that were focused on different parts of the plan. There, for example, the first one was transportation on November 13th. We had 2 webinars that were a very similar presentation to this that went over different aspects of the plan and how to comment and participate in the review. And we've also had a series of office hours that have been on Fridays. So there's one more office hours session that's tomorrow from 11 to 2 at the Summit Fire Station in Donny Park. And these are times when the planning staff is available to chat with anyone about the plan and their comments on it. And during the 60 public review on the staff side, we have also been testing the plan and looking for potential issues, potential conflicts that need to be resolved in the coming revision. So the main way to view and comment on the plan is through this online site Conveyo. And I believe the link to our project site is in the memo that you should have received about the regional plan. And this is one of the website will direct you towards this site. On Conveyo, you can scroll through the different chapters of the plan, and you can also leave comments directly on the document through these comment bubbles if you're able to see those kind of small on the screen, I know. And you can also view other comments that others have left, and you can respond to those comments or vote them up and down. So it's a pretty interactive way to review the document. There's also the option to download a PDF at the link in the description, or we do have a few hard copies that we can give out, though it may take a day or two to get those printed for you. But if you'd like one, you can feel free to reach out to me. And then you also have the option of emailing in comments. So a few notes about what's different about this draft plan. There are many fewer goals and policies in comparison to the 2014 regional plan. The future growth illustration is now parcel specific, and I'll show what that looks like on a future slide. There are these new categories in addition to the goals and policies of implementation guidelines and action items. So the implementation guidelines elaborate on the goals and policies, and they describe the how and the principles that we would use while implementing those goals and policies. And then the action items are an action list for the city and county of what programs or what actions we would want to take to carry out the goals and policies. The plan is organized in a different way with the way that the chapters flow, and it's meant to provide more clarity about what applies to development applications versus what's advising city and county staff more generally, which I'll also elaborate on that on the next slide. And then this is a living document, and there's procedures that are outlined for how it can be amended. And there have been a couple changes to those categories in this version. One example is that the proposed change is that administrative changes, small things like fixing links and typos, would go through an administrative process and not have to be brought forward as a plan amendment, which has public hearings as part of it. So it would make it easier for staff to make these to correct small errors this time around. So this is a diagram that explains the role of the regional plan, and this is a new diagram that we're testing out, so feedback on this is certainly welcome. But we have the regional plan as kind of a foundational long-term document for the city, and all these other documents build on the regional plan in different ways. On one side of the triangle, we have development review. So there are certain legal requirements for how the regional plan applies to development applications that come in to planning and development services. For example, a rezoning case has to show conformance with the regional plan. And there are certain parts of the plan that are specifically would be used to evaluate a development case. And then there are also area and specific plans that carry out and get more specific from the regional plan to a particular neighborhood, for example. Those also affect development review. And then, of course, our codes and apply to development, and those are updates to those codes are guided by the regional plan. And then on the other side, the regional plan also expresses a vision for different parts of the city and county and what we should be, what types of programs we should adopt citywide or county or in the region. And then getting to the nitty gritty of the budget and funding for those different types of programs. So the regional plan includes both parts that relate to development and parts that are more programmatic and express a vision for what city staff and county staff should do. So related to that, this is an outline of the plan. So we have two introductory chapters that talk about what the plan is and how it works, as well as introduce the region. And then we have the policy section, and that includes a chapter that's just goals and policies, and they cover a wide range of topics. And then there is chapter 4, which is the growth and land, which includes the growth and land use framework. And this policy section is has that application to the development review triangle side. But the goals and policies also cover a lot of these other topics that are listed in the next chapter. So that is the implementation section. So it includes social and economic systems, transportation, resource stewardship and resilience, parks, recreation and open space, water resource management, energy, infrastructure, and public safety. And so the airport related parts of the plan are the goals and policies chapter has airport goals and policies, and then the transportation chapter, chapter 6, also has some more on the airport. So thinking about how the plan can be more prioritized and less conflicting, there have been 5 priorities that have come from community engagement. They've come up over and over again, and these are kind of driving the focus of the plan. So the first is creating more housing attainability in the region's neighborhoods and centers to mitigate displacement and reduce housing costs. Housing costs frequently comes up at every engagement that we do related to the regional plan. Then we have creating mixed-use denser neighborhoods that support a variety of housing types and active transportation. We have reduced community-generated climate pollution and protect air quality, protect the region's significant natural and cultural resources, and expand the region's preparedness and resilience to hazards and climate change. So now I'm just going to talk a little bit about the airport-specific content in the plan, and starting with the goals and policies that relate to the airport. So there are 1 goal with 2 policies, A for airport. So goal A is strengthen and expand the role of Flagstaff Pulliam Airport as the dominant hub for for air passenger, air freight, public safety, and firefighting aircraft operations, general aviation, and other related services in northern Arizona. And then we have the two policies nested under this goal: provide safe, efficient, reliable, and sustainable transportation facilities that encourage and accommodate air and related ground services at the airport, and then plan and manage development in the vicinity of the airport to discourage land uses incompatible with airport and flight operations. So then I talked earlier about implementation guidelines in that they expand on the goals and policies and talk about how we would achieve these, the principles that we would want to employ. So there are these 6 implementation guidelines that go with Goal A, and these are in the transportation chapter, not in the goals and policies chapter. One is to maintain and expand the role of the airport as an important link to the National Plan of Integrated Airport Systems. We have one about multimodal access and transit service, and that it could be improved to the airport. We have expand and improve facilities that support increasing the destinations and frequency of air service. And then evaluate energy, water, solid waste, and air quality impacts of airport operations for improvements and efficiencies. We have one about dark skies and minimizing light while complying with federal regulations and safety requirements. And then improve airport user experiences and travel opportunities. So that's the main content that directly talks about the airport, and then I'm going to get into a little bit of some of the some of parts of the plan that are relevant but less directly talking about air travel. So this is the future growth illustration that's proposed in the draft plan. It identifies different, every parcel in the city has a land use category, and then there is a description of what each of these categories looks like and what our goals for these categories are, and how it aligns with density and our current zoning, etc. So there are neighborhoods, centers, and corridors. And a neighborhood can be urban, suburban, or rural. A center can also be urban, suburban, or rural, and then the corridors can be urban or suburban. The neighborhoods are, of course, the most residential areas of the city. The centers are the most intense and dense parts of the city where you could see mixed use, both residential and commercial, or one or the other. And things like apartment buildings the centers are the places that are most supportive of those kinds of structures. Then we have some categories. And then corridors are also similar to centers, but they go along arterial or collector roads, and they have access to those roads. So they are going to have a more auto-dependent form likely. Then there's also these blue areas, and the airport is marked as one of the blue areas, which is employment district. That's that light blue. So employment district includes both industrial areas and business parks. So those are areas that would have limited residential, but much more of those industrial or office park uses. And then we have the really dark blue, which is another type of employment, but those are university or research districts. So for those darker blue areas, it's more of a campus-like environment with some kind of institution usually that's anchoring the campus there. So this is a zoom in on the airport. I mentioned it's the light blue employment district, and then surrounding it, the lighter green is federal lands and working landscapes. So these are, for example, Forest Service lands that would have their own land management plan, not necessarily under the jurisdiction of the city, and also private state lands that are not specifically parks and open space. And then the darker green is parks and open space. So Fort Tot Hill Park is right marked in that dark green. So there are some specific goals and policies that apply to these different categories. Employment districts has a goal to maintain and protect a supply of land to accommodate the needs of existing and future employment and manufacturing. And then these are a few of the policies that are under this goal ED. So ED1, encourage the continued intensification and expansion of uses in an employment district and protect existing industrial, warehousing, and distribution uses from encroachment of incompatible uses. We have expanding opportunities for research and development and technical employment in employment districts, and then allow for workforce and employer housing and employment districts to support recruitment and retention of employees when it can be accommodated without environmental impacts to residents, and it does not encroach on the potential for future expansion of employers. So we are recognizing in this plan that because housing is such an issue, it can perhaps be a good idea to support employer housing in these districts, but ultimately we also want to protect the supply of land available for these types of uses. There are also some goals and policies related to economic development under this goal HE, which is healthy economy. So the goal is create a vibrant and diverse economy that supports a thriving workforce, innovative businesses, and expansion of new industries that are compatible with the region. We talk about attracting and retaining businesses and industries that are complementary to the region's vision and priorities. Promoting skills training and job creation in targeted sectors. And those are listed as construction, forestry, advanced manufacturing, healthcare, astronomy, and bioscience. And then there's also an action item related to this that was added specifically out of a conversation from the committee, the regional plan committee, about wanting more specifics on the types of sort of job creation and skills training we could do specifically for these scientific and technical jobs. So this is one of the items on the checklist for the city and county that was developed with the Northern Arizona Technology Park in mind. So it says support the development and expansion of bioscience related facilities that create scientific and technical jobs with improvements in infrastructure needed for their uses. So these are all goals and policies and other parts of the plan that we welcome your feedback on, as well as the other content that's in the plan. This is just a sample, but we're looking for anything you have in terms of feedback on these, in terms of it can be about the wording, the map, and the different ways that those land use categories were assigned. It's all fair game to comment on. So as I mentioned at the start, the deadline is coming up quickly. It's next Thursday. There's the option of commenting on Conveo on the site that I showed on an earlier slide, but also you can see Sarah Dechter's contact information on the side of this slide, and I can also make sure to share that information with you all, but you can send her emailed comments as well. We have one more office hours, and you're of course welcome to come speak to us then. And then there have been some commissions that have formed a subcommittee because of just the timing of the comment period. I expect that there's likely not time to have a separate subcommittee meeting on this, but we are certainly welcoming individual comments from you as well, and some committees have chosen to just submit comments as individuals. So then just a note about what happens after the 60-day review. There's going to be a round of analyzing the comments and making edits based on those comments. We may reconvene the regional plan committee depending on what types of complex issues arise from the review. There'll be a final legal review, and then the Board of Supervisors for the county, the City Council, and the Planning and Zoning Commissions from both the city and county will have a retreat on this draft, likely in March, ahead of having public hearings for the city, and eventually for city residents, this document will be voted on, so it'll appear on the ballot. So that's the end of my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions from any of the council members?
Yes. At our last meeting, we'd mentioned that we had some zoning issues that we were attempting to get rectified. Does the final approval of this plan, could that fix it for us if we just put it in there?
Nelson, did you catch that question?
Yeah, I'm not super aware of what you talked about at your last meeting in terms of zoning, but so these categories in the future growth illustration, there is a table in the document that identifies which zones are compatible with these different land use categories. So yeah, that would, depending on how the zones correlate with these categories, that could be that would be something to look at.
Also, to give you a little bit more context, what was discussed at the previous meeting was that we have a section of the airport that is currently zoned as research and development, but that our master plan shows for hangar development, which hangars can only be built in the current zoning code under a public facility. So I think reading between the lines a little bit, I believe both those categories would likely be allowed within that light blue square, right? So this would still be something we would need to get a zoning map amendment for separately in the regional plan process to update that on our site specifically, correct?
Yeah, so public facilities is a zone that's allowed in, I believe it's almost every category except for probably working landscapes or working federal lands and working landscapes. But yeah, so the zoning process, depending on when it started, it would either be under the current regional plan, or if this plan was already adopted and then the rezoning process started, then it would be under this this regional plan. But yeah, I guess it would depend a little bit on when that rezoning was going through.
And so I guess just to elaborate a little bit on the difference between the regional plan and the zoning code, and also correct me if I'm incorrect on any of this, the regional plan land use identities are a little bit more broad than we see in the zoning code. So I think this sort of steers the way the zoning code is applied to particular parcels. Is that fair to say, Elsa?
Yes, that's correct. I can I'll pull up while we're on this subject, I'll just pull up the chart that is kind of a crosswalk between them. That's actually something that we didn't have in the current plan, but we have added it now, recognizing the need to sort of clearly identify how these two things interact. So give me 1 minute.
So zoning code changes typically go to, or zoning changes for parcels of property typically go to council for approval. One of the questions council is going to ask, one of the things they want to see in those presentations is, does the proposed land use conform to the current regional plan? So when we go to rezone that parcel, they're going to say, is it in conformance with the regional plan? Though the zoning code is sort of a level.
So this does, it's getting me done.
Exactly.
Got it.
Yes.
Okay.
So airport staff worked with the planning staff and Elsa's team to try to make sure that what we were showing in this current version of the regional plan is compatible with things like the airport master plan. And that they kind of work hand in hand, even if they're maybe a slightly different level. The regional plan is a little bit of a higher level document versus the master plan is a little more detailed for this particular site. And then the zoning, which will reflect what it is.
Okay.
Is that fair to say, Elsa?
Yes. Yeah, I'll just quickly show this. This is on the Conveo site. This is the page of the plan that talks about how the land use categories, how the zoning is assigned to each land use category. So we have this column, existing compatible zoning categories for both the city and the counties. So yeah, you can see what's designated on the future growth illustration and then what zones would be supported there. And this is definitely a place where if there's something that maybe we've overlooked a zone that would make sense for one of these categories, that's the type of thing that you could certainly give us comments on.
If you notice, employment district is what the airport was. And that allows both research and development and public facility, which is the zone that the current property is, research and development and public facility that we wanted to change to. So really, in either case, the zoning is in conformance with the regional plan, but to be in conformance with the master plan, to be able to develop that property, we need to have it rezoned, research and development and public facility.
What is public facility? I mean, how's that defined?
That's a good question. That might be a good topic for a future agenda item, but I can tell you that most of the airport is in the public facility. The runway, where the terminal building is, all that is in the public facility zone. So I think it's pretty broad. I don't have the list in front of me, but I know that most of our property here is public facility, except the stretch where we would like to build some more hangars, which is research and development, which doesn't let you build hangars, even though that's what that base is we should build there.
Yeah, and I don't have the full list for public facility either, but it can also include schools, fire stations, those types of uses are also public facility.
Any other questions?
I got one. Does the announcement by the Navajo tribes concerning their gambling, what do they call it, gambling facility out at the old Horseman's Lodge, is that going to create any issues with the zoning out there? I know there's a lot of angst about what they're going to build there.
Yeah, I know that announcement. I believe that came out after we put this out for the public review. So I don't know enough details about how that land was currently zoned to really have a good answer for you at this point. But yeah, we are aware of that. So I think in any case, just by the time this plan is adopted by the city and county, I'm not sure exactly how those timelines would work out, but I don't know that this plan would really have much influence on that.
Okay. Any other questions?
Hearing none.
Okay. Then the report on the airport rates and fees.
We'll pull up that presentation again real quick here. And thanks, Elsa, for the information on the regional.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
All right, so Claire mentioned this earlier in the meeting. The last meeting we had, we did give a budget overview, overview of the budget process. I left some of those slides in here with a few minor tweaks in case we need to refer back to them. I'm not going to go over these in detail since we went over them in our previous meeting. But just a very brief oversight from the airport. What has led to this discussion about rates and fees is the status of the current airport budget. So airport being an enterprise fund, being generally speaking, self-support, or the intent is for enterprise funds to be self-supported through their own revenue. Our ongoing revenue sources here at the airport are things like leases, license agreements, and fees, with one-time revenue sources being federal and state grants that are typically used for capital improvement type projects. Next slide, please. Now, the challenges we're having with the airport fund is funding shortfalls, in that the airport has not historically been self-sustaining, which is not unusual for airports our size, and that is the situation that this airport's been in for some time. The challenges that bring up are things like maintenance, with infrastructure needs and increasing costs associated with those infrastructure needs. We have identified currently more than 30 unfunded maintenance projects here at the airport that we're trying to find a funding source for. Additionally, with vehicles, we have a pretty large fleet of vehicles out here, 3 fire trucks, 8 or so pieces of snow removal equipment, 2 fairly large mowers, plus a small number of administrative type vehicles. With those vehicles entering an average age about 20 years, the maintenance cost for those vehicles is also increasing. And then also an increase in the number of federally mandated programs that we have to meet and comply with as part of that. That's another issue we dealt with some decrease in federal funding support from what we've seen. We previously had some grants for things like TSA that have been eliminated, some grant programs that we don't see revenue from anymore. Next slide, please. So we talked last time about some solutions, right? And what we were going to look at there. So through some things like grant funding, and that's through engaging with the city's lobbyists, with our council on some legislative priorities to try to let our state and federal representatives know about the importance of some of these grant programs and other funding sources, advocating for the sustainability of those programs and increase their funding. Parking revenue is another funding source that we didn't have previously that we've added. Proposed development, which is at Northern Arizona Tech Park, which is airport property, but on the other side of J.W. Powell Boulevard, that we received a release from the FAA to use it for non-aeronautical purposes. We've entered into an agreement with a developer to develop that property and hopefully gain some revenue there. Once that's on board, I think they have a 5-year period to develop the infrastructure there before we start collecting revenue from that. And then property along the Westplex, which is the property that we'd like to build hangars on, but so far have been unable to because of the zoning issue that was mentioned earlier. Also terminal concessions. We actually have a bid out right now, or request for proposals that closes tomorrow for a micro market edition, which is kind of a fancy, somewhere between a vending machine and a full restaurant. They'll have fresh food and beverages that is staffless, that can operate 24/7. Looking to add one of those on both sides of the security checkpoint to hopefully increase our concessions revenue. And then user fees. So this last one is the one we're going to touch on today. So if you recall in that last meeting, we talked about a potential check-in on our user fees through rate studies and proposed fee studies, fee revisions and additions. So current airport fees that we charge, this isn't an exhaustive list, but this covers most of them. So aircraft storage permits. So the folks who rent a hangar or a shade or a tie down from us to store their aircraft. Landing fees, which are fees based on the weight of an aircraft that are currently charged to our air carrier and to our air cargo companies. Fuel flowage fees, which are fees that we receive a percentage of every gallon of gas sold at the airport that then goes into the airport fund. Parking, which we talked about earlier. Also ground transportation permits. So to be able to pick up passengers at the terminal, folks need to get a ground transportation permit. That's for commercial companies that want to do that. So there's a permit system in place for that. And then ground leases, which can be either aeronautical or aeronautical, which is an important distinction that I'll touch on in a moment. So aeronautical fees, the FAA has some prescription for what they want to see before those fees are changed. And basically, the FAA requirements want to show that fees are competitive, but also that they're reasonable. So one of the things that they want to see, especially from commercial service airports, is that airports have a methodology for setting their fees. They're not arbitrary. So for any aeronautical based fees, so those are things like the aircraft storage units, the landing fees, fuel flowage fees, lease rates for aeronautical users on the airport, as well as commercial use permits that are related to aviation activities. We're planning right now to go through a rates and charges study by a consultant. So remember at the end of the last meeting, we were talking about next steps and we were going to go into more detail. So we wanted to talk today about the next steps for those rates and charges specifically. So for aeronautical use fees, in order to check that compliance box and make sure that our fees are reasonable and in line with what the FAA expects, our plan right now is to hire a consultant to look specifically at those aeronautical fees, see how we compare to similar airports to Flagstaff. That'll help us develop a fee schedule and see what we're charging now, how do we compare to other airports? Also with what we aren't charging for, or what are other airports potentially charging for that we are not. This is a little bit of a different case for non-aeronautical or administrative fees. We have a little bit more flexibility on those, and those costs we're planning to develop by staff, which internally, which will be a little bit of a quicker timeline, a little bit of a quicker turnaround. So there's things like the parking fees. So we set the parking rates back in 2019, believe it or not, was when those first came up, or the idea for the parking lot. I believe we officially got the rates approved by council in late 2020 or maybe early 2021. So it's been some time since we've looked at the fees for the parking lot. So that is going to be something that we're going to be checking out internally. Same thing with things like security badging and background check fees. So employees at the airport, also our tenants that have aircraft storage permits with us receive a security badge to access the airfield. We're, according to the TSA, we're the only commercial service airport in the state that does not charge a fee for printing badges. So that's probably not going to be a huge fee, but we would like to at least get to the point where we're recovering the costs. So we do have to send out, we have a cost to send out for the background checks that those folks go through. We also have costs in badge stock and printing. If people lose them, of course, that cost goes up, as we're reprinting badges. So we'd like to find a cost recovery model for those types of fees. And then ground transportation permits specifically is another one that we haven't looked at in some time that I think it's time to revisit. Now, on the parking fees, we talked about fees to review, and I want to make it clear that this isn't necessarily just to increase. This is to make sure that they're kind of correct for the services that we're offering. And in some cases, for example, parking, as I mentioned, we've seen our parking revenue kind of plateau a little bit, right? Whereas people have changed their use patterns and they maybe aren't parking at the airport as frequently. But the answer might not be to just charge more, because if we charge more and it drives people away, that's not what we're going for, right? We want to charge the right amount to generate the business we're looking to do. For parking specifically, that could be something like adding different categories. So right now we have an hourly rate, a daily rate, and a weekly rate, with the weekly rate being a little bit cheaper than the daily rate. So the longer you park, the less the rate becomes. What we'd like to look into is adding a monthly rate. So for folks that come to the airport a lot, maybe it makes sense to have a monthly parking permit. So instead of paying just by the day that you're there, maybe it's a way that businesses who need to leave a vehicle at the airport can do so. Right now, maybe they're leaving it off-site, and if the rates are affordable enough, we might get some traffic back that we aren't seeing. Similarly, what we've heard from some customers is that when the parking was free at the airport, we had a lot of people that parked out here that weren't using the airport, which is something we knew had led to some of the parking challenges we had. But now that we have space again, is a time to see if some of those folks come back. We don't necessarily mind if people that aren't traveling from the airport park here, as long as we have the capacity for it. So if we have a monthly parking permit, for example, if a family has 4 vehicles at home and only a place for 3 in their driveway during snow removal season, and they can't leave it overnight without getting a ticket, maybe this is a place that they can park that extra vehicle and help us get some revenue that way. So the idea would be to look at things like a monthly fee that could be at a reduced rate, but might still help us capture some business that we're not currently seeing. So that's the proposed fees that we're going to be looking at. And Adam, is there one more slide in there?
May I ask a question?
Sure.
Will the consultant be looking at the FBO contract and those fees as well, or is it just outside of that?
Well, so contracts that are already written are sort of exempt from that. We can't really change a contract unilaterally, but what they could look at is lease rates. So airports are generally required to charge fair market value for ground leases. So whether that's an FBO or whether that's a new business that wants to develop a private hangar there, we need to figure out what fair market value is for that ground lease before we can write the next lease. So when we talk about developing an area along Shamrell, for example, or when leases expire and we go to the newest iteration of them, we need to know what that fair market value is to establish what that next lease will be.
I see.
So this exercise should have been done for some version for every one of the ground leases we currently have. So if those leases have been in place for 20 or 25 or 30 years, that exercise was done then, and those rates are locked in for the duration of that lease, but we can examine that when the next one comes up. And so that is something that we're going to be asking the consultant to help us with, is looking at what the fair market value is for various types of uses around the airport for ground leases.
Excellent. Thank you.
So in terms of next steps, a little bit of a deeper dive into what next steps mean for those rates and fees. So for the aeronautical rates and fees, what we're going to want to do is develop a scope of services for the rates and charges study. So that's going to include that long list of aeronautical fees we looked at: landing fees, fuel flowage fees, ground leases, commercial use permits for various types of commercial activities on the airfield. Once we get that list, we're going to solicit a proposal from a consultant or consultants and hopefully enter a contract with them. These are typically not amongst the most expensive, so depending on the procurement rules, they can be a little bit of a streamlined procurement to get through the city. From that, we're going to develop those proposed fees. We'll bring that back to discuss with you here at the Airport Commission, and then go to City Council for approval on those if applicable. Most fees we need to get approved by City Council. There are some exceptions to that, so depending on the fee type, we'll take it to City Council for that approval if that's required. For non-aeronautical fees, little bit of a different process, a little bit easier for us to get through because we don't have that FAA requirement to meet with. So staff is going to develop proposed fees based on our actual cost. For example, like the badging, looking at the cost of badge stock, the cost of staff time that's taking to develop those on average, or what comparable airports are charging. We'll bring those back and discuss those here with you at the commission. And then again, seeks approval from city council if applicable, or if not, we can just enter those administratively. So those are the steps that we're going to be doing, and that's the things we're going to expect to bring back to you on some future agenda items once we have some more of that data in place. I know that was kind of a lot. I know we had a little bit of a longer meeting today, so I wanted to leave some time for questions. Did anybody have any questions about airport revenue and fees in general, or about the specifics of the approach we're talking about for both those aeronautical and non-aeronautical fees?
Real
So
quick.
this is Commissioner Schaus, if I could have a moment.
Hmm.
Or I could ask a question.
Sure.
So I was curious, is there any desire for the airport or the city council to look back into supporting the airport more through the general fund?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so that is a parallel effort that we're going through. So every year the city's budget process, the fiscal year is a July 1st through June 30th fiscal year. So we're actually into the budget process for fiscal year 26 right now. So part of that is all
Gotcha.
divisions and departments make requests for their needs based on things like we're talking about today, their operational needs versus what they have in their current funding source. We typically do make requests for support from the general fund. We're not the only entity within the city that is facing some funding shortfalls. For example, last year we made a request for, I don't know the exact number, but we had some personnel requests, we had some maintenance item requests, we had requests for a few different things like that, and we didn't receive most of them. And the word we got was that, there just wasn't the capacity within the general fund to help us beyond what they were able to give us, which was kind of enough to scrape by. We're making do out here. I think we're meeting our compliance targets, but there's more we would like to be doing. So we will be making those asks again, but historically, we have not had a lot of success at getting exactly what we would like to through those general fund requests.
What would help get success? Curious.
That's a great question. And I honestly,
Would additional public comment so I mean, the way that I look at it, and I'm fairly well tied into a couple different aviation communities through some philanthropic organizations and a local business that I own. And I know that in terms of like airport use and like looking at the parking, starting to decline when it's travel season and stuff like that, the sentiment that I hear is the enterprise that is the airport, rather than being more of a service, is, maybe rubbing some of our public the wrong way, possibly.
yeah, so in terms of advocacy for the council, all the budgets do go to a budget retreat or a series of budget retreats that are open to the public and do have an opportunity for public comment. So I think if there's any type of city funding that anyone would like to advocate for, that is a forum for that. Those will be posted on the city council meeting website. They're typically early in the year. There's usually January, February, March kind of time frame for that series. There's usually one specific to capital type projects, one that's a little bit more specific to the overall budget. So I would encourage anybody who wants to advocate for any type of funding to do so in that forum. And then the slide that's up right now is a little bit, without jumping ahead too far, is the two from commissioners. So when it comes to the customer service aspect, to what we want to hear, what we want to do our best to try to meet those public expectations for the airport, this is a great opportunity for both attendees to these meetings to address those, or for commissioners to bring those up for us to re-examine. We're always open to feedback, and we're always open to changing the way we do things to try to do a better job. One thing I will remind everybody is that due to the city or the state's open meeting laws, we can only address items in the commission meetings that are agendized. So if we have a question that starts to go outside the agenda, this is a great place to bring that up so we can add it to a future agenda where we can have a more in-depth conversation about that. Yeah, so that'd be another forum if we are getting some of that feedback. We do have, so we've recently updated the airport website without going into too much detail again to stay with that open meeting law. But is a publicly available email on there, plus the airport's phone number is listed. We do try to address all the comments we get via email or phone and change what we can to make things better associated with this.
Awesome. No, and I really thank you for answering that. Not trying to be off topic at all. My apologies if that was.
I think
But
that's
yeah,
just
really pertinent. The information, being able to know where to public comment and be able to share that so that, the public can comment. I think it just, that's my important facet of being able to find that information and have it readily available.
I appreciate that. And one thing to note on the budget retreats is they don't typically see a lot of public involvement, even though it is available. I think I've been to those for maybe 3 or 4 years in a row, and I don't think we get more than 1 or 2 public comments at each budget retreat. So that opportunity is
Yeah,
there.
and I think that the public just doesn't know, to be really honest.
Yeah, very possible.
Hey, Brian.
So I really appreciate all the hard work you guys do. Thank you again.
Thank you, Commissioner.
We were talking the other day. When I signed my lease, as I said, for the AAA rates and charges, it was 20% above the national average back then. And it's tied to the CPI, which has been very high recently, including the fuel flow rates. But conversely, the tie downs, the T-shapes and the hangers haven't gone up for years. And one of the things you talked about having a hard time covering is maintenance on these buildings that are getting older. So when they go through this race and charges, they're obviously going to look at all that.
Correct.
I think, as I told you, it didn't go over well the last time they talked about that. But some of the other things like electricity, I mean, the FAA encourages you to be a self-sufficient entity, but most airports aren't, if the truth be told. But they're a huge economic generator for the community in terms of the hotel, so forth and so on. But, we're paying, for example, for free. I mean, is that really against your grants and assurances? If it's coming out of the airport fund, you're giving away free electric at these charging stations?
The ones at we're not paying those days.
Oh, I thought you said we were.
Oh, for the EV cars?
I guess that's a good question. I think that
the EV cards we're not paying for those.
Yes,
That's sustainability.
sustainability division in the city is paying
Correct.
those electric bills.
So those meters, whatever, are totally separate.
That's my understanding. Yeah.
And the one thing, it was my understanding that the largest single source of revenue at the airport was the rental car commissions.
Yeah.
So is that what you meant by, because you didn't, I don't know, did you say that? I mean, or did you mean that by commercial?
Oh, I think there was one. So one of the things we're looking at in terms of fees is rental car customer facility charges. That's something that the rental car leases are due to be updated. As Orville mentioned, generally speaking, it's true of most airports, it's true here. Number 1 revenue source for our airport is rental car concessions. Number 2 is parking. That's pretty typical for most commercial service airports. One of the things that we've seen other commercial service airports do, because one of the challenges is finding the funding to improve the infrastructure that serves places like the rental car companies. Sky Harbor, for example, among others, has charged a customer facility charge, which is a fee that gets tacked on to every vehicle rent. It's a relatively small fee. It's usually somewhere in the neighborhood of $1 a day or so that is generally transferred to that rental car customer, but then goes into a fund that can only be used to support infrastructure for rental cars at the airport. So when you see airports build a consolidated rental car center offsite, it's usually how they pay for that, like the one at West and Sky Harbor, for example. So that's something we're considering. Again, that's something we'd like to get our consultant to weigh in on and make sure that it's appropriate. But that is something that's on the list to look at.
How long will that study take you?
They're not, the consultants that do them do a lot of them. So typically they have a lot of data in hand. I don't think in my estimation, it's just
6 to 9 months, probably.
I was gonna say 3 to 6, so I'll call it 6 months.
Possibly.
Less than a year for sure to get that type of information. I'm trying to remember, you added something.
No.
Oh, regarding the aircraft storage rates, the previous at some point in the past, there was a schedule of built-in rate increases. And so the last rate increase we saw was 2021 on the hangers and shades. And that was kind of the end of our list of previously approved rate increases. So like you mentioned, it's time to kind of revisit that. It's been about 3 years since we've had that looked at. And that was, I don't know the details of the previous one, but my assumption that there was probably a rates and charges study that laid out, a decade or more of rate increases. That kind of
A lot of it, because I've been coming to these commission meetings for 30 years, a lot of that had to do with servicing the debt on the new hangars they built.
Right. Yeah, and I believe we just finished paying that off. So I believe that all the airport's debt service has been repaid.
No fees.
No maintenance.
No maintenance.
Yeah, you push from paying for building it to paying for taking care of it at some point
Right.
in the life of the infrastructure.
I have a question if I can speak up. I'm on my phone, so it's hard to raise my hand.
No, you sound great. Go ahead.
Awesome. This is more of a question / comment. I know we've requested having the car rental agencies come in and kind of give us an update on where they are. And I want to echo Commissioner Schaus's comments on the hard work that staff is doing, because this is hard. I mean, this cost recovery thing is, I have a lot of concern, specifically around the car rental place, because as we do business in Northern Arizona and people rent cars, they're coming to the airport and they're already paying a higher tax, because there's a higher tax that's affiliated because you're renting from an airport property. And that's universal, right? Wherever you go, if you rent a car in LAX versus in the city, inner city, it's going to be a different tax rate. But when you couple that, what I'm worried about is death by 1,000 cuts. We're looking at, potentially changing the parking fee and another car rental. Just the cost to renting a car at the Flagstaff airport is a lot. And on top of the absorbent airline fees that, that you're looking at, the cost between flying out of Flag versus Phoenix, I would hate for this to be something that is like the final stab where everyone's driving to Phoenix because it's cheaper. So I don't know what that looks like, what a rental car facility charges, all of those things. But I know you guys are in a really hard spot and I appreciate all your hard work, but I also want us all to be cognizant of all of these discussions about fees. What does that look like in terms of the business that's already located here in our region? So thank you for letting me make that comment.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Jackson. That's a great point. That's one of the reasons we want to have this discussion at forums like this. So we don't want to make these decisions in a vacuum. We want to make sure to engage our partners and make sure that we're looking at this more holistically. And we're not just kind of making a scattered approach to just adding fees in places that don't necessarily make sense. So we'll add a little bit of time to it. I think speaking from the airport staff's perspective, it would be great to have enough revenue to get all the stuff done that we want to around here, but we want to make sure we do that in a measured way that makes sense, that doesn't drive off business. So that's why we're going to be having these discussions here. I did see that Commissioner Schaus made a comment in the chat about economic impact analysis. That's actually another great point. And that is something that airport staff is going to be bringing up in the next round of budget discussions. The state of Arizona, through the ADOT aeronautics team, does commission economic impact study every few years. We have one that was completed in 2021. We'll be making sure to highlight that data, showing the economic impact that the airport makes on the region, on city, the tax revenue that we bring in that doesn't necessarily hit the airport fund, but goes elsewhere. And I did speak with a consultant who was working with ADOT. It sounds like they have plans to maybe revisit that in the next year or two, because that being for 2021, even though it's fairly recent ago, especially when it was really based on the 2019 dollars to generate that 2021 study. So I think it's time to advocate to our partners at ADOT to update that again.
Yeah.
And it includes some specifics about each airport that we will be able to share.
Brian, I just say one other thing, having sat through these meetings for 3 decades, there's always this comparison to Phoenix or wherever. We're in the last 2 years, we've had 25 feet of snow. If you look, we're currently ranked like the 3rd snowiest community in North America, based on recent snowfall. This airport has a lot higher operating costs than almost any other airport in the state, particularly a 139 air carrier served airport. And when we're talking about trying to make our budget balance, I mean, when you've got millions of dollars in snow removal equipment, plus the temps you have to bring in, and then you look at the cost, one de-icing, how much is one de-icing on the runway?
It's expensive. Yeah.
What is it? It's like $7,000-8,000, I think you said. But it's, I understand, oh, we don't want, death by a million cuts or whatever, but it could be death by a million cuts to the airport itself if we don't maintain financial sustainability in terms of the services we have to provide and the level of safety. I mean, the FAA dictates how quick you have to remove the runway at the amount of snowfall and how tall the windrows can be. There's a lot of compliance that's involved. And when you're in a place like with this kind of snowfall, it makes it hard to compete with other communities that don't have similar operating costs like we do. And I just, I think we need to get people at this point. I don't know anybody, I shouldn't say I don't know anybody, but most rational people don't want to get stuck in I-17 in a traffic jam. You're still going to pay for parking down in King Sky Harbor. I think a lot of that, we're past that now. Just you have to keep that.
I don't know that we are. I don't know that the business community is, Orville.
Well, I mean, we're a tourism-based economy. I've sat on a lot of boards, and over the years, I've heard all this, we're gonna do this, that, and the other. At the end of the day, we're tourism-based. It's people coming in here to see all this stuff. And yeah, we have local businesses, but we're never gonna be able to compete with the lower elevation business hubs. It's just not gonna happen. So I don't know why we want to get all twisted up about it when it comes to what we charge.
Because I think that there are people that are using our airport, and I think that if we add so many charges that it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make financial sense to fly out of Flagstaff. So if we're going to solely put all of our eggs in the tourism basket, then sure, let's do that. But what happens when the economy shifts? I think that diversification and perhaps a more a balanced approach would make sense, where we're serving both our residents and the visitors. That's what my comments were about, Orville.
Yeah, I appreciate the comments, everyone. And one thing to note too that I think is back to a very early slide that we had on employments. Our employments were very high in 2021 and have decreased significantly since then. But this year and last year are going to be higher than every year prior to 2019. So the airport has seen a really big spike and a really big decrease after that, but we still landed at a place that is busier than we ever have been prior to 2020, essentially.
With a single carrier.
With a single carrier. And so our hope is that, as we continue those air service attraction efforts, we'll continue to see that number go up. But we are still seeing, if you sort of flatten out or sort of take the edge off of that spike and the decrease associated with it, we are seeing more business than we've traditionally seen out here in previous years or even previous decades.
Okay, do we have any other comments from the airport commissioner members about anything?
Is Orville?
Chairman, Orville Wiseman did join us a little bit later. Did you want to go back and touch on the FBO update?
Sure.
Sorry about that. I was over dealing with something at FBO and somebody said, hey, the airport commission meeting. I'll keep it short. I'm sorry, I don't have some kind of little presentation. I'll try to do something next month. We just did we do a monthly operations meeting. We just did a debrief on that earlier this week with city operations. And, we had a lot of charters, Airbuses in and out for the football games. We changed how we handle that this year, parking them more on the north end of the ramp, keeping trying to, so we don't have to move so many jets and so forth and so on. And we had them bust the team out versus them all park out back looking like a SWAT meet on the weekend back there. That went extremely well. We had a vice presidential candidate fly in. That went real well. Other than that, there isn't a whole lot to talk about. I don't know what's going on. We've had numerous broken corporate jets over there, and trying to accommodate that sometimes gets a little challenging because they all went out on the ramp and whatnot, but staff's working through it. We went over the fuel numbers, and I'm sorry, I didn't see that email. But I would have swore I sent that. But anyway, it's been kind of a weird year. Months that have been slow have been stronger, and months that were strong were kind of slow. It's all kind of balancing out. It looks like we're probably going to finish down about 2% for the year, which I thought was going to be worse than that, particularly based on, you know, the economy and whatnot. We won't really know until it's done. We're seeing more military right now. We just had a couple of military helicopters come in, and we got the employee company Christmas party Sunday with 60 attendees, which is the most I've ever had. But that's because we have a lot of families now, which is kind of neat. So if you have any questions, I know this meeting's gone long. So
Thank you.
Anybody have any questions for Orville? Okay, with that, I want to thank the staff again for a good meeting and for the hard work that you guys are doing. Wish everybody a great holiday season. And with that, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Okay, and a second.
Second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay, with that, we'll see you all in January.
Thank you.
Everybody have a happy holiday and a happy new year.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You too.
Thanks for coming, everyone.
Thank you for all that information. It was great.
the 16th. At the 16th.
He's the ninth.
9th.
January. I think this is the first meeting since I've been at the airport that's had 100% attendance, so.